We're back with another podcast style episode. Last time, you guys loved it. We were with Max and Hayden from HD Automotive talking about all things petrol versus diesel and why I chose a 1FZ for the new build. It was pretty controversial, but you guys seem to love it. So, in this episode, we've got Paul from Bilstein Australia. We're here at Heesman's and we're discussing all things four-wheel drive suspension. Leaf springs versus coil springs versus coilovers, airbags, heavy spring rates, and everything in between. There's one other key difference, is that there is no oil-leaking Land Cruisers behind us. We are here at Heesman's and, well, it's supercars galore. The value of cars in this room alone, you could buy 300 plus 80 series, so one for every day of the year. This is Paul. Paul has been with Bilstein Australia here at Heesman's for
40 years.
40 years. So trust me when I say he's an absolute expert wizard at this sort of stuff. He's the man responsible for building the original B60s for the Naughty 40, RIP. He's responsible for the brand new 14-inch coilovers that we're putting in the new build and has been doing this stuff, custom suspension solutions for four-wheel drives and race cars for the best part of those 40 years. So if there's anyone here qualified to answer your questions and my questions, there's this man right here. So without further ado, shall we?
Let's go.
First cab off the ranks, I think we talk about the elephant in the room, and that is the constant online debate of leaf springs versus coil springs and which is better. Now, back in your day when you were a spring chicken, Paul, leaf springs were probably rampant.
Yeah, basically everyone ran leaf springs in the front and the rear of their four-wheel drives.
Yep.
Now the tendency's gone towards coil springs. Leaf springs, to dive into it, leaf springs were designed to take weight. Coil springs are there for more of your handling and your comfort.
Yep.
So if you're going to take weight in your car, you use a leaf spring. Coil spring for the comfort. It's basically as simple as that.
Okay, but there is still the ability to load up a coil spring. So like the 300 series, 200 series, etc.
Yep.
We see coil springs in the rear, same
Yep.
as Ford Everests and that kind of thing.
Yep.
They still have the ability to tow the same 3.5 tons as what a leaf sprung Ford Ranger can.
Yep.
What are the key differences? Why are we seeing some manufacturers going to coils and sort of sacrificing that ability to carry load and others not?
The main reason is customers are asking for a more comfortable vehicle.
Okay.
So it's the comfort versus, the uncomfortability of a leaf spring. Although leaf springs have come a long way, you've got the parabolic leaf spring now, which does feel quite good and can
Yep.
take a lot of weight.
Yep.
That is the main reason they're going that way.
Now, if someone out there had coil springs in the back of their vehicle and wanted to load it up really heavily,
Yep.
like
Yep.
you do, tow a van and that
Yep.
kind of thing, what is the best thing for them to do? Obviously, if you're going to load up a coil spring, it's going to sag. You're going to have the full Cali lean special,
Yep.
which you don't want.
No.
What do you think the best solution is? 'Cause
So the heavy spring rate means you're going to have a harsh ride when you're not towing.
Okay.
So you can put airbags in the back, which will complement the spring rate.
Yep.
So the more air you put into those airbags, the higher your spring rate will go, basically.
Okay.
So a lot of people now run the comfortable spring with the airbag inside the coil.
Now, a set of poly airbags, for example,
Yep.
in a coil spring, for instance, doesn't necessarily mean you can load the car up more, but it is going to help support that ride. Is that correct?
That is correct. You've got to look at your vehicle GVM, you've got to know your weights,
Yep.
and then you can add onto that. Now, with the airbags, it is better to pump them up and then load it up and then let the bags down until you get your ride height again, so your headlights are pointing in the right
Gotcha.
direction and everything.
Now, let's jump back to leaf springs versus coil springs.
Yep.
Do you think leaf springs are dying off, a dying breed, a dying thing, or do you think they're going to be around for a long time?
I think they're going to be around for a long time.
Okay.
They're still developing parabolic leaf springs where you haven't got as many leaves and they're tapered, so you get a nicer rate out of them.
Okay.
And they do take weight
Yep.
beautifully, and that's the big thing with people loading up your four-wheel drives, and also your passenger cars, but mainly four-wheel drives. When you're loading them up, you need that support, and
Yep.
the leaf spring is what gives you the support. Just the way that they operate and they work, it is a much nicer system than a coil. You can add weight to a leaf spring. It doesn't drop as much as what it does in a coil spring.
Gotcha. Now, talk about links for a second. I'm only just discovering the technical, scientific world that is suspension links and geometry and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I guess a big benefit to a leaf sprung setup, even in older things like Hiluxes and stuff, is that you don't have to worry about panhards and
That's correct. Yeah.
you know, trailing arms and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Same with the rear, it's a lot more simple. I guess the movement in the diff is all controlled by the leaf spring. So you packaging, I guess, is a little bit nicer because it is just the leaf spring and a shock.
Yeah. So with your leaf spring, you don't get as much pinion angle change.
Okay.
That's another positive sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then with your trailing arms and your panhard rod and all that sort of stuff, there's more to tune that than there is a leaf spring.
Gotcha.
So the homework that has to be put into, say, a 4-link rear end or a panhard rod or whatever, the homework that needs to be put into that versus a leaf spring is a lot more.
Worlds apart.
Yeah, worlds apart sort of thing. But the technology's there, why not use it?
Big time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, coil versus coilover.
Okay.
We're going very advanced now. And I guess we're going to use my car as an example because we have just thrown the kitchen sink at it and it's getting everything. So you probably guys by now have seen the episodes. If you haven't, go back and watch them. We went 3-link front in the 80 series and 4-link rear.
Yep.
And we've gone the 14-inch coilovers front and rear with the hydraulic bump stops.
Yep.
I think the biggest reason we wanted to go with that sort of suspension with those links was to achieve the most amount of articulation we could.
Yep.
And also from a packaging point of view. Do you think a lot more people should be moving towards something like a coilover setup in custom applications? Do you think there's still, you know, a separate spring and a separate shock is still has its day and has its place?
With your separate spring and separate shock, it's a lot cheaper option.
Yep.
All right, and you've got a spring.
I can confirm what he's just said. Yes.
Yeah, you've got a spring that is a set height. It can take a set amount of weight.
Yep.
So you put that in the car and you go, and you don't have to worry about anything. It's all set, it's all done. To go to a coil over, you're still using a coil, but you're running it on the shock absorber. So the packaging is better because you've got it, but then you've got to strengthen your shock mounts to take the weight of the vehicle. Before the weight was on, say, the chassis and your arm.
Yep.
Now the weight's been transferred onto your shock mount.
Yeah.
So you've got to strengthen your shock mounts to be as strong as what the chassis and everything is there.
Yep.
So you've transferred it all, but it is a package where you can just take it out and put it in. The other thing with the coilover is you can adjust the height. Okay. So you can have it set at a height with nothing in the car, drive around, load it up to go away or load it up to do whatever sort of thing.
Yep.
And you can wind it up and get your ride height back again.
Yeah. Now, we say adjustable height on the coilovers is good, but there are instances I know in B60s and stuff like that you've got on the Bilstein 300.
Yep.
The traditional McPherson struts are still height adjustable, although not as easy.
Not as easy. Yeah, so what we do on the Bilstein shock is we run a circlip groove and the spring seat sits on that circlip groove. Okay. What you can do then is compress the spring, so the spring seat becomes loose, move it up and then move the circlip up onto the next groove and you can keep raising your car doing that way. We find it useful with that sort of stuff where people start to build their car. They don't have the budget to go out and buy the winches and the bull bars and all the study accessories for it. So the car's set at a height. Once they add all that weight, the car would come down. We've got the circlip grooves then to lift it up. They don't have to go and buy new springs and a whole new suspension package because they can just lift it up on the circlip, regain their 2-inch lift or their height.
It, I guess.
Yeah, future-proof. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Remote reservoir shocks, seemingly all the range now in the four-wheel drive industry. We're seeing manufacturer after manufacturer coming out with some attempts at a remote reservoir shock. Benefits, believer or non, let's talk about it. I know the coilovers we've just built are my first set of remote reservoir shocks. I am very excited by that. Although the B60s that I had in the Naughty 40 originally were not remote reservoir, and I don't think I ever found the limit of those. Let's talk about that.
So remote reservoir shock absorbers are just that. They have a reservoir for the oil remotely from the shock absorber. What we prefer to do is to have the shock absorber doing all the work. The less points you have on that shock absorber for it to leak, to get damaged, to get ripped off, we believe is better. Just because we believe it doesn't mean everyone else has to believe it. So remote reservoir shocks do have their place in the industry. Now, what a remote reservoir shock does, that's easy for you to say, has an oil reservoir separate from the shock absorber, which allows the oil to transfer from one to the other.
Yep.
Now, during that transfer, it does cool the shock absorber.
Okay.
So if you're operating, say, on a corrugated road, if shock absorber is just moving like this,
Yep.
it's heating up. It doesn't really transfer the oil to cool off. It still heats up in that little area,
Yep.
and it won't transfer a lot of oil over. You need the full articulation for the shaft, which is what basically pushes the oil into the canister.
Yep.
It's like your bucket of water that's full to the top and you put your foot in it, the water has to go somewhere.
Yep.
So with that shaft going inside the shock, it pushes the oil into the canister.
Gotcha.
Now if your shaft's only moving 100 mil, you're only getting that short motion, probably not even reaching into the canister.
Yep.
But if you're doing full articulation, then yes, the oil will go into the
volume.
canister and it will cool down.
Yeah.
The other reason why you put canisters on is for travel.
Yeah.
That shaft has to go inside that shock body.
Yep.
If you've got a gas chamber, say of 30, 40 mil, that's 30, 40 mil you're missing of up travel and also of extension,
Big
all right?
time.
Because your shaft can only be X amount to go inside the body.
Right.
So if you move all that into a canister, then your shaft can go
The full range
the
of
full
that
range
tube.
of the tube,
Gotcha.
and therefore you're gaining that 30, 40, 50 mil, whatever your gas chamber is,
Yep.
you're gaining that travel.
Gotcha.
So with yours, yes, we wanted all the travel we could,
Yep.
so therefore we used the canister. In the vehicle before, you didn't need all that travel,
Yep.
and as you said, you never found the limit of them
No.
because you helped us put the shocks together.
Yeah,
You saw how much oil went into
I'm seeing
that.
a lot. There's between 1.5 and 2 litres of oil in
Yeah,
that shock.
in that shock.
It's a huge amount. So,
Massive amount, and the cooler that you can run the shock, the better the performance of the shock absorber is going to
Yeah,
be.
big
So, yeah, running the canisters, but driving around here, doing most slow four-wheel drive stuff, rock crawling,
You're never going to use.
you're never going to use it. So,
Yeah.
and personally, I don't like them because it's another point that can get ripped off.
Failure point.
Failure
You've got-
point.
yeah.
You've got 2 extra leak points, let's
Yep.
say. So that's just my personal opinion. But as you see, we still build them. I enjoy doing the stuff, so it's all
Yeah,
good.
yeah, that's all right then. Now, adjustability.
Yep.
The internet will tell you that your shocks must be adjustable. We're not talking about height, we're talking about
Rate.
compression and rebound.
Yep.
Where a lot of people now are producing shocks that are adjustable.
Yep.
Some manufacturers are saying it might have 20 or 30 clicks. Whether that's actually accurate is often
Yeah.
not the case.
Yeah.
It's sort of whatever it is. Do you think, here's my understanding, or here's my opinion.
Yeah.
I think you're a lot smarter than I am. I think Bilstein and all the technology and the 100 years of technology behind Bilstein is probably a lot smarter than I am.
Yeah.
So I don't particularly want to muck around with the rates of my shocks after they've been set by an expert like you. So the coilovers that we've gone with are not rate adjustable.
That's correct. Yep.
Because I think they're going to be set up perfectly and I don't want to mess with that. A lot of people out there think opposite. I know Bilstein do adjustable shocks and non-adjustable shocks from a rate perspective.
Yep.
What do you think when it comes to that sort of thing? If someone's really begging for an adjustable shock, what are you thinking? Do you think it's worth the extra money that it might cost someone?
Yeah.
Where are you at
Okay.
with it?
So my theory with the adjustable shocks is, again, the old keep it simple sort of thing.
Yeah.
So no adjustability, we'll keep it a lot simple because as soon as you get a dial or something, you're going to get dirt in that dial and you're going to cause a potential another leaking point
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But they do have their place. A lot of people, the reason why you go to a coilover setup or a different setup on your vehicle is because you want to customise that vehicle
Yeah.
to your needs, to how you want it.
Yeah.
So how I feel the car should ride may not be how you feel it should.
Yeah.
You want it to ride, so
Yeah.
therefore you have the ability to adjust the damper rate of the shock absorber.
Sure.
Sometimes with some shock absorbers, it's like when a bad song comes on the radio, you can't actually get rid of that bad song. You can only
Yeah.
turn the volume up or down on it.
Yeah,
So
big time.
Yeah, so there is some times where the shock absorber is not tuned to where the rate
Gotcha.
can be used. Other times they're fantastic. You can go out, you can go on sand, tune it for that. You can go on gravel, tune it for that. You can
Yep.
go over corrugations, tune it for that.
Yep.
Driving up there to get to your destination, let's tune it for that.
Yep.
I prefer just to get in the car and relax and just
Yeah,
go.
it's a bit like that.
Yeah, it's a bit like that.
Probably we've got enough things to think about as forward drivers, you know, like what song am I going to be karaokeing to on the 10-hour drive up the PDR and that sort of thing. You don't really want to be thinking about lying down in the filthy dirt or mud or sand or grass and
adjusting your shocks
and mucking with dials. You don't really know what's going on.
There's a lot of people out there that will know through trial and error what feels good and what does not feel good.
Yep.
But you will get more of a reaction, you'll get more feeling back through the car by doing tyre pressures.
Yeah.
If you're on corrugations, you can adjust your shocks. Oh yeah, that feels better. But you do your correct tyre pressures and it's going to feel way better.
Yeah, let a bit of air out and you're probably going to achieve the same thing.
Same thing. Yeah, same thing.
Nice
So
marshmallow effect.
If I've done many race cars, I've won a lot of championships, and tunability on the shock, 100% every day of the week. Four-wheel driving, tunability on the shock, I would probably go without it, but that's not to say I'm not speaking for everyone.
Less important.
Yeah, I feel it's less important. Like if you're going to spend the money on something else.
Yeah,
get yourself a good 12-watt system, get yourself a good fridge, get yourself stuff that you're going to need.
Spend the money on the red arc gear or
you can spend the money on a winch, recovery gear, stuff like that, because you're going to use that over like, it was very comfortable before I got bogged.
Yeah, that's right. And guess what? It doesn't matter how comfortable the suspension is when you're bogged and you don't have a winch. So
that's right.
It's interesting you say with the volume of the bad song on the radio, because I do think that there's a lot of people out there that would buy cheaper shocks that have probably been imported in bulk that would be tuned for an 80 series Land Cruiser. But I guess the bad side of that is that there is no two 80 series Land Cruisers in Australia that are the same.
That's correct.
They were made 30 years ago. They've had repairs, they've been crashed. Some have got different bars, different winches, different 12-volt setups. The weight is strewn differently throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
So you are, I think, in occasions going to just be trying to fine-tune a shock that's just not really valved correctly. So I guess that brings us to another massive point, which is the beautiful thing about, I guess, the coilovers that we've gone, getting a quality suspension solution from someone like Paul and the team here at Bilstein, is that if we put these in the car and we find, okay, the tuning's just not quite right, it's as simple as pulling them out and we can re-valve them, re-shim them, adjust them, dial in the spring rates here in Sydney, Australia, and get it absolutely knocked on the head. You can corner weight the car, you can know exactly where the weight is, because my 80 is going to be a lot different to your 80.
Yeah,
and they're not going to be the same. They'll be similar, but they won't be the same. So being able to isolate what each wheel's weighing, what the spring rates need to be, what each shock needs to be valved at is super important as well. And that's something that I know a lot of manufacturers that are importing these, the cheaper overseas shocks and that sort of thing, they are budget friendly, but you're not going to get that tunability, the rebuildability as well, and all that sort of things.
Yeah. So, and that's what is important to some people is like, we got a lot of customers that do a trip a year, let's say, and it's a big trip and the shocks do copper pounding. I mean, you look at every component on your vehicle, tyres and suspension are probably the two that cop the most punishment out of it all. So we had a lot of customers that do a trip, bring their shock absorbers into us. We'll recondition the shock absorbers, service the shocks, make them basically like brand new again, except for maybe the paint on the outside or something. But everything else is new. New seals, new oil, new gas, new everything. Dyno, make sure that the rate is bang on what it was when it left. Give them back to the customer. They've now got new shock absorber warranty on those shocks. Awesome. They don't look new, but they do get the warranty and all that sort of stuff. So, you get your 20,000, 12 months, whatever sort of thing on your warranty on those shocks after they've left our servicing.
Phenomenal.
Just going back onto your brands, cheaper brands of shocks, a lot of those shock bodies are all the same with the same rate in them, and all they do is screw a different end fitting on. So instead of a pin at the top, they'll screw an eye fitting on. Same with the shaft. It's all just swapped over. So, you might think you're buying something for an 80 series, but it might be for a Pajero, it might be for the rear of a Triton. It could be for so many things, and they've just changed the fittings.
Changing the mounts.
And that's why they're cheaper, is because they can just change mounts and it will fit so many different other vehicles.
Right, okay.
Sorry if I've just exploded a bit.
No, I like it. I know the internet's going wild in the comments right now. How could someone sell me something that isn't the case?
That's right.
It is true. Corners have, not necessarily even corners, but they do have to be cost-cutting measures for a shock to be
so cheap.
You're not going to get the same performance out of a $150 shock as you are a Bilstein. That's just a fact. And the difference is having a shock that's tuned specifically for your vehicle, and whether it's even just for the vehicle or specifically to your personal preference and a mass-produced shock or anything like that. It's been quite a debunking little episode.
I know.
We have spoken about lots of things, that Leafs are redundant and coils are the best. Coilovers to be exact. Nah, I'm just kidding. But I will always say that to you guys. And it's been very interesting. Airbags, spring rates, rebuildability, remote reservoir coils, and all the rest of it. The best part is, Paul's actually got a YouTube channel, Rift to Adventures.
Oh.
So, what's going to happen now is you guys in the comments below, if you have any questions that we didn't talk about in this episode, I'm going to get a little account called Rift to Adventures to jump into the comments over the next week or so and reply to a couple of them. Because this man right here is a wizard when it comes to it, and he will have the answers. So if there's any serious questions, we're not talking about our raw sex appeal or anything like that. If you have any suspension-related questions, drop them in the comments below, and myself or Paul will try and answer them and hopefully give you guys a little bit more information that we might have missed in this episode. Again, hopefully you enjoyed the sit-down style podcast app. I know they're pretty easy and a lot of fun for us to film.
And where's the Bilstein tattoo?
The Bilstein tattoo. If this video, I know, we've got the one tattoo. This video gets 5 views. I'll get a Paul tattooed somewhere on me. And Paul will get a Sam tattoo.
I'll get a Sam tattoo, yeah.
We've discussed it. Probably on our ass cheeks. But, mate, thank you very much for
Not
joining
a problem,
me.
mate.
Appreciate it.
Easy
Let's
as.
go build these coilovers, eh?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Why
let's go
not?
get that done.